This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by Connected Data, the makers of the Transporter and Transporter Sync. Your data in your own private cloud, safe, secure, and cost-effective. Save 10% off any transporter model, up to $35, using the code MV10, or get $20 off the Transporter Sync with the code MV20, both at filetransporterstore.com. Welcome to the MacJury on Mac Voices. This is the Talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, the MacJury has been on just a little bit of a hiatus, simply because of, CES, Macworld, NAB, sleep. And I can't very already say that sleep had a lot to do with it, but just have been very busy and haven't wanted to just start dragging people in to talk about things. But it's time to talk about a few things, and a few things that have happened and are happening right now. Before we get into all that, though, let's find out who you're going to be hearing from. So I'm going to go from left to right on my screen for no good reason. So first up, that means Mr. John Martellaro. John, it's great to have you back. Thanks for being here.
Hi. As everybody knows, I'm a senior editor for the Mac Observer, and lately I've been writing for The Street as well. That's kind of fun.
Oh, I didn't realize that, John. That's great.
Yeah, Rocco Pendola got me roped in. He's a great guy.
What kind of things are you covering? Anything in particular?
I'm trying to educate investors about all the Apple insights and knowledge that we all have on the Mac web that doesn't seem to percolate over into analysts' Wall Street observations. So I'm kind of taking the Mac Observer and all my experience and packing it up and moving it over there and laying out some stuff for people to better understand Apple as a company.
I'll refrain from smart comments about analysts and the Mac web and the wisdom of the Mac web. So, but good luck and congratulations. That's great.
Yeah, thanks.
So next up, in the center of my screen and soon to be the center of yours, Mr. Ken Ray. Ken, it's great to see you. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Chuck. I appreciate it. Yes, Ken Ray. I host a daily Apple news and news related to Apple News podcast. Well, news called macOS Ken. And then I also have a daily publication on the newsstand called iChart, which draws largely from macOS Ken stuff. But then there's the occasional other thing as well. So that's me. There you go.
Oh, no, wait a minute. I think there are a couple other occasional things.
Well, what do you mean? There's Mission Log. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, Mission Log and Day 6.
Well, there's Day 6, which is okay, so Day 6. Yeah, see, but you're here 20 minutes just talking about what I do, Chuck. That's the thing. So Day 6 is a premium show that was set up to support macOS Ken, although that's also a large part of what iChart is. And then Mission Log is a podcast put together by Roddenberry Entertainment. John Champion and I go through and watch every episode of Star Trek. We are just about to wrap up the animated series. Then we'll take a few weeks and do some interviews, and then we move into the movies, and then we go next gen. So anytime's the right time to start, though. So if you feel like you missed too much, they're all online. You'll have a good 70-something episodes to catch up, and then we can all watch Star Trek together.
And I have to say that you produced 3 of my favorite shows, so I want to make sure they all get promoted.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, John.
Last up, but absolutely not least, because he never is, Mr. Mark Fuccio. Mark, great to see you again.
Hi, Chuck. Thanks for the invitation. I look forward to a good discussion with you and John and Ken. As many of your readers or listeners probably know, I'm out here in San Jose in the heart of Silicon Valley. And I do marketing consulting, so I do everything from sort of a big think to a big talk, to help companies target and find markets and, bring products into the market and launch and, help them promote them and build appropriate relationships. So it's always something new and always very interesting.
So you have your finger on the pulse of Silicon Valley.
Oh, I don't know if I would say that. I don't know if anyone could because it's so diverse out here. But a lot of what I'm doing right now, I'm working with a whole bunch of storage companies in cloud, devices and virtual file systems for high-end enterprises. So a lot of it's very interesting stuff and very important.
Absolutely. Well, it's great to have you. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for the invitation.
So, guys, I guess let's start with the new. And frequent viewers, listeners to Mac Voices know that I'm not big on rumors. So I would prefer to think of this as just maybe speculation. The what if, not just that, oh, it may happen or it may not, but what if Apple did buy Beats? Is this important? Is this significant? Especially given Apple's cash hoard, yes, it's a sizable acquisition if it were to happen, but it certainly is not going to have a major effect on Apple's finances. Why has this captured everybody's imagination? John, I want to start with you because I think you don't have a lot to say on this or prefer not to. Is that correct?
Well, I haven't commented on it because I have a sneaking suspicion something could go wrong or it isn't a done deal yet. There's lots of rumors flying around. I think the best perspective I have on it is that it is a good thought that Apple has been victimized a little bit in iTunes by modern habits of listeners. As the other guys, I'm sure, going to point out, other services like Pandora are very popular for streaming. Business Insider has a chart that shows that physical downloads are down about 12%. Physical purchases, downloads are down about 1%, but they still dominate. There's 80% of the market, whereas streaming is rapidly improving in its popularity, but it's still only about a fifth of the market, according to Business Insider. So the things I think about are that Apple's planning for the future, that iTunes Radio hasn't been a huge success, and this might be something that Apple's trying to do to sort of give themselves a boost with the younger people. But boy, 3.2 billion? Nothing's worth that much. Nothing.
Interesting phrase, John. Victimized by, I think you said victimized by current habits or current listening habits. That's an interesting way to look at it, and I think there's a lot of truth to it. I would not have thought about victimized, though.
Well, the argument that I've seen is that Apple has sort of lost its focus and has allowed iTunes to kind of stagnate while the millennials are moving quickly towards subscription services and streaming. And this concept, in fact, Rocco wrote about that today at The Street, that Steve Jobs believed that people wanted to own music and was resistant to streaming service when he was still alive, but that things may be changing. And Apple hasn't been nimble enough in recognizing this youth movement towards subscriptions. And so his viewpoint is that the next phase has arrived, and Apple was a little slow to react. I think he may have a good point.
Ken, I want to make sure you and Mark get in here too, obviously. You just did a great interview on day 6 with Jim Dalrymple, which I thought you both put a lot of decent perspective on this. But where do you stand in all this? Because I know you've been covering this on macOS Ken since it broke.
Well, I mean, the thing that I think is interesting is, John's right. If I could parse your words a tiny bit, John, no one thing is worth $3.2 billion, but they're not buying one thing. And that's been the really interesting part in this. People say, there was even, I think it was Tony Sacconaghi said, well, all the articles say they're buying it for the hardware. I don't think they're buying it for the hardware. I think they're buying it for the music service, but I don't think the music service is worth that much. Well, they're getting Jimmy, Iovine, I don't know. I've been corrected by email recently, but it was by email, so I still don't know how to say it. They're getting Jimmy Iovine, they're getting Dr. Dre, they're getting Beats headphones, and they're getting Beats Music. Beats Music, honestly, seems to me to be the least of it, because according to a couple of surveys out there, they have less than 200,000 subscribers, which is nuts. That is a ridiculously small number. I would be happy to put something out that has less than 200,000, but about 100,000. But for Apple to pay a significant amount of money seems kind of silly, except if they've already got the infrastructure, they could fold in to iOS 8 or 9, whichever way. Then that much further ahead. the whole thing about Steve Jobs saying that people want to rent their music, own their music, not rent it. There are two things that I think about there. First of all, as you pointed out, times do change. The other thing is Steve Jobs said they weren't going to put video on an iPod until they did. If Steve Jobs were alive, there's a chance that we would have this. And I personally have always argued that had Apple done a subscription service 3 or 4 years ago, subscriptions would be a much bigger thing today. Because of the same reason that iTunes Radio, everybody talks about the fact that iTunes Radio hasn't done well. Wasn't it number 2 or number 3, I believe, just by virtue of the fact that it got put on and that many people tried it, that it got put into iOS and that many people tried it. I can't remember if I have that correct. I want to say though it's in the top 3. And that's not seen as a huge success by people, but that's how big or how prevalent iOS is. The other thing about it is it's just exciting. It's just exciting to it's neat to think that they might be thinking about something different. And I think everybody who says, well, they're just trying to buy street cred, and so that means they can't innovate, or they're just trying to buy headphones, so that means they can't innovate, or they're just trying to buy a music service, so that means iTunes is in trouble. They're not splitting it up into different parts. They're buying a ton of stuff with this one thing. I would be curious to know also what they're buying in terms of demographics. I've read a couple of things about Beats that say they're going after young, urban, early adopter, willing to spend money. And Apple's already got that. I've only heard one analyst, and I can't remember which one, might have been Sakanagi again, saying that this goes a fairly far way into getting into the African-American community. I don't know where Apple is in that. I don't know how deep Beats is in that, but if that is the case, it would be the first time that I can remember them making a play for a specific demographic, and maybe one that Apple feels is underserved. Because if they can somehow tie it all in and pull more people into the halo than are there currently, then there are just so many ways that it seems like it could work. It also seems like there are lots of ways that it could be a bad idea, but it's fun. It's a really fun idea. So, you're right, Chuck. It's only a rumor, but it's a big rumor and it's a fun rumor. So I'm willing to play with this one much more than if the next iPhone is only 4.7 inches instead of 5.2. So I think that's part of the reason that it's caught everybody. It's gotten everybody's attention. And forgive me, I know I'm talking a lot. There's one more thing to it. I love the fact that every note from Wall Street has been, I don't get it. And that's been fantastic. And there are some people who are like, I don't get it, but it seems cool. And there are some who say, I don't get it, and it seems terrible. I love the fact, though, that you don't see people going, oh, yeah, this was obvious. You've got a bunch of people going, huh. Seems to be a lot of what's being done. And that, just the wild card nature of it makes it a tremendous amount of fun to play with, too.
Mark, I'm curious on your take because you have, I think, a different view on things. You have a little more business-oriented view maybe than the rest of us, or at least a different business-oriented view. I personally am, though, so tired of if Steve were alive, because as someone, Ken...
Not allowed to say that.
Yeah, Ken or John said, okay, Steve evolved, too, in his thinking, either because he had to, because it suddenly made sense, or because it was all misdirection. I don't know which. So given that, where do you stand on the possibility of Beats? Okay,
so let me answer your direct question first, and then I'll go on to some speculation or discussion, based on points Ken and John have raised. Where do I stand? I have no idea. Absolutely. It seems to me it's like all Apple rumors. It could be credible. It makes sense, from a certain point of view. But there are no facts behind it, so it's hard to say that there's any logic justifying it. Although a lot of people are creating a lot of logical arguments to support why it makes sense for Apple to do it in various different ways. I would go back to, I think, the point that you're making, which is, yes, Steve Jobs was very opinionated, but he never let his opinion get in the way of changing it when new facts and logic come to bear. And I think that I certainly agree with what John was saying, that I think music consumption habits are changing. I think this is a little bit of a generational thing. I dare say that all four of us on this panel are of the generation where we want to own music. Oh, Mr. Ken Ray is shaking his head no.
Yeah,
Not by a mile.
we have
No,
a nice
I was a Rhapsody subscriber in 2004. I want to say 2004, 2005.
Okay.
And then I can't remember why I gave it up, but I gave it up for a bit. But I got back onto Rhapsody, I want to say in 2009. And I was on it until I got onto Spotify, I believe, in 2011. I've been paying somebody for music for years.
Okay. And, is the reason for that convenience?
The reason for that is I don't necessarily want to own everything that I want to hear. I mean, I go through phases.
Right.
I don't necessarily need to. There are some days that I want to listen to, 6 albums by one artist, and I might not even, go back and hit that playlist again for another year and a half to 2 years. Did I have the $120 to drop on the, 6 albums or however much it would have been? No, I didn't. But they got paid something when I played it. I paid something to have access to it, and yeah, no, I'm not. Because you don't really own the music anyway, right? It's an MP3. I mean, can I hold it anymore? Once we moved away from CDs, once we moved away from album art at that point, then I don't feel like I own the music anyway. So I'd pay $10. I'd pay the price of one album to have all of them every month, no problem.
There is that
Right.
issue
So
of the inheritability of your iTunes account. And, remember the issue of the inheritability?
Yes.
For your errors of the iTunes music that you bought.
No.
And that iTunes account disappears. So
Sure.
does your music.
Right. It's DRM.
Makes
Yeah. So, but just rolling it back, I think that sort of the changing of listening habits is part of it is wide selection, where you can sample way more, from a subscription service, and if you actually have to buy and download, whether or not you're thinking, do I really want to drop $100 to listen to these albums, to buy these in order to listen to them. I think the theme is more about improved convenience and accessibility, and I think certainly that it looks like what is going on with a lot of video, that people are streaming it, and the idea of looking at television, that also seems to be as endangered by different generational shifts. So I really think what we're seeing here is Apple is changing and moving on to something new and different. I think maybe what is so different about it this time versus say when they did similar thing 12 or 13 years ago with portable music players in the iTunes store is now Apple has grown. It's so big and so many people are looking at them, and I think this is a normal part of business transition, that markets change, and the imperative for companies, they want to keep on growing. They want to keep, their profits and increase. So it's unthinkable that they would decide, okay, well, we can't do anything. They have to replace it with something. Look at the declining iPod sales. They've certainly backfilled and replaced those with upselling people into iPhones and smart other devices. So I think we're seeing at the core. I think there's a similar type of transition going on with regards to music. Now I think what makes Beats so interesting is, as Ken was saying, it's a multifaceted asset. It has a streaming music service. It has a brand recognition, and as a result, it's harder to look at it and value it, which is very much sort of the problem that Apple has. And to me, the most interesting thing of this whole rumor, because we're still talking about rumors at this point, is how quickly it came on, and then everyone was saying at the end of last week, don't understand it. And then there was a trickle over the weekend of people finding rationalizations for it. And all this week, it seems everybody's saying, okay, well, it makes sense. This is a natural for Apple because it gives them, streaming music, gives them, brand access, gives them entree to, different, communities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As I said, this is great bar talk. We really don't know because we're not inside Apple. So without knowing, what their objectives are and how they're thinking about it, this could just come and go. I mean, like a lot of other Apple rumors have in the past.
This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Transporter from Connected Data. Your data in your own private cloud. safe, secure, and cost-effective. What's important to you in selecting a cloud storage service? Security? Syncing? Automatic upload of photos and videos from your iDevices? Cost? If you picked any of these, then Transporter is your best choice, and here's why. First, security. When your data is on your Transporter, it's sitting wherever you choose, on your desk, at your office, your choice. Not in a server farm that has employees who you don't know, not in a commercial cloud service that is a target for every hacker out there, not to mention any misbehaving intelligence agencies. Syncing? Your Transporter can sync your data to pretty much anything. Your Mac or Macs, your iPhone, your iPad, even a Windows PC or an Android device, if you really have to. The important thing is that Transporter supports pretty much anything you use. Automatic uploading of photos and videos from your iPhone or iPad? No problem. Connected Data just updated the File Transporter app for iOS so that you can do just that with the flip of a virtual switch. Pictures of your vacation, videos of the board meeting, anything you have will be safe and secure on your own private cloud, freeing up storage on your device so you can take more. Cost? That might be the Transporter's high point, because it's your most affordable cloud storage option, period. You pick the Transporter from 500 gigabytes to 2 terabytes at a cost of $199 to $349, and you're done. A one-time shot. Or, if you like spending money, you could choose 500 gigs of storage from Dropbox and pay $499 today. And then set a reminder on your calendar to send them another $499 same time next year. And the next. And the next. Me? I'll take Transporter. Or if you need more storage, consider the Transporter Sync for only $99, where you pick the hard drive, up to 4 terabytes, and give yourself an even bigger personal cloud at an even better price. Or you can make both options even better by using the MacVoices discount codes. When you go to filetransporterstore.com and use the code MV10, you can take 10% off any transporter from 500 gigabytes to 2 terabytes. Or get $20 off the Transporter Sync with the code MV20. Either way, you're getting the best in private cloud storage. Transporter from Connected Data. Your data in your own private cloud. Safe, secure, and cost-effective. Thanks to Connected Data for their support of MacVoices. Guys, I want to just take a quick walk and see if you can agree with me or fill in a couple holes here. Because I've been trying to do my own analysis. There's no other analysis out there. But I haven't seen anybody really talk about a couple things that I think are important. iTunes, number one, they have a streaming service that the consensus among people that I've talked to seems to be that it's fair for music discovery. It's not great. Pandora, Spotify, everybody seems to beat it. Beats seems to have, from what the reviewers, and I haven't tried Beats, seems to have a better track record for music discovery. That's the way I'm reading the reviews. Again, I haven't tried it. The demographics are an interesting piece that I don't even want to get into because I don't think we have enough information. The Beats headphones, the audio files seem to say that they're not quite junk, but that they're heavily weighted toward a different listening and different music style. There's been a lot of talk about, Apple should have bought Sennheiser if you really wanted that. But Beats definitely have a style component that probably Sennheiser doesn't. You have the Dr. Dre thing, which I don't know how valuable that is. He seems to be very powerful in the music business. I don't pretend to have any intelligence there about that. So let's see, what else? What else are we missing? It seems like that there's value across the board that Apple might leverage, doesn't have to. What if Apple took the Beats headphones and released a second line of Beats that were an audiophile Beats, or would that just completely dilute everything? I don't know. Right now, the only thing Apple has are earbuds, I believe. I don't think that they don't have anything over ear, do they?
Not that they make, I don't think.
Yeah, not that they make. So
Right.
this would put them in a whole new area, and it would seem to be a refocus on music. That okay, we want to give it to you, we want to sell it to you, we want to stream it to you, and we want you to listen to it on our branded or at least controlled brand earphones.
So I think about this in ways that I've thought about. Hypothetically, what would an Apple TV be, and other things, and that I think that if you look at sort of the core markets that Apple's in, the Macintosh is slow growth, but it's basically saturated. It's sort of at equilibrium in terms of market share. I think the big news over the past couple of years is iPhone, is in that sort of situation. They're showing a little bit of growth now as they're getting broader distribution into new markets. Maybe if they come out with a lower cost device, they might be able to, stimulate some of their growth. But it's not, growing at the 70% year over year rates that it was once upon a time. So I think overall that, we're starting to see that until whatever the next big thing is, that what Apple is doing is it's shoring up the attractiveness of its ecosystem, and I think we're starting to see that they're maybe starting to signal that the idea of one size fits all isn't quite right, and maybe that's why we'll have a complementary music service, and as you were alluding to, different sort of higher priced earphones that they could get some improved sales and margin from. But I think it's really battle of the ecosystems. Until we see whatever the next big device is that is going to sell in huge volumes where everyone wants one, if such a thing ever does happen.
John, I want to ask you, because you said that nothing is worth $3 billion. So let's just say that this acquisition did go through and that it was a complete bust, that it was a complete mistake, that Dre is not worth anything. The Beats brand, they pull the plug on the Beats brand. The streaming thing is not worth anything. It just falls apart completely after it's done. Other than the perception that Apple made a bad deal, does it really make any difference even at $3 billion?
I had this exact discussion with Dave Hamilton the other day about spending that kind of money to no good effect. We all hope that Apple has the wisdom, Tim Cook has the wisdom to spend this money wisely. Even though Apple has a lot of money in the bank in the US and overseas, we don't want to see the company wasting the money. And Apple's always been very prudent with its expenditures. And we have a whole meme about how Apple buys technology and high-spirited technical people. And so part of the discussion I've seen is there's something going on here we don't understand. And I've been thinking about that. And I think part of it is an Apple culture. Imagine the design process of iTunes Radio. You get a bunch of engineers together and you get the licensing people involved, and you start acquiring music and you start constructing the app, and you got the software people involved. And then you got the business people jumping in and saying, oh yeah, we got to be able to sell ads, and there's going to be a financial aspect. And when the whole thing is said and done, people weren't standing in line exactly. I mean, I like it, and I know a lot of people who do, but it wasn't wildly successful. And I'm wondering if maybe Apple was taken aback by the fact that their entire organizational structure wasn't able to create a product that was wildly successful in the style of iPods and years ago. And that the acquisition of Beat is maybe an effort, an expensive effort, to acquire people who are tapped in and can create that sense of excitement. There have been rumors about these guys becoming executives at Apple. And maybe the engineers and the executives at Apple are just too kind of locked into their hubris. We throw it out there. And there's a famous saying, under the most strictly controlled conditions of temperature, pressure, and humidity, the organism will do as it darn well pleases. And I think the organisms did as they darn well pleased this time, and Apple's searching for maybe a magic formula. Still isn't worth $3 billion.
Not by itself, but I mean, so It's hard to see how this could go so poorly. I mean, the way you're sort of alluding to, Chuck, if rumors are to be believed, speculation, whatever. The last time anybody actually knew how much Beats was making, I believe it was $500 million a year in sales. That's the last time somebody can actually point to and say that is how much they were making at that point. Conjecture is that they're making as much as $1.4 billion in sales at this point. So it's hard for me to see Apple really screwing in a big way with the Beats headphones at all, because people are right now paying $200 for what a lot of audiophiles say are sub-quality headphones. They're paying $200 for them. I don't think Apple's going to go in and say, we're going to take your Beats and we're going to make them better, because people don't want them to be better. People want them to be Beats by Dre, right? They might change it to Beats by Apple, but I can't imagine that Apple's going to go in too much and say, we've taken this thing that you love and screwed with it, because then maybe I don't like it so much anymore. I personally think it would be a mistake to drop Dre's name from it, because I think a lot of people buy Beats by Dre. I don't think they buy Beats headphones, but that's one thing. $3.2 billion is far too much to spend for Beats music. You're absolutely right. But it is a cool thing. Sorry, there was something I didn't want to interrupt you, John. Nobody at Apple can be surprised at this point that they have actually done an internet service that didn't do quite as well as they hoped it would. I mean, Ping is the one thing that Jim Dalrymple kept bringing up this past weekend, and it's only the most recent. It's only the most recent. I mean, Mobile Me was another one. I mean, Apple, for all that Apple gets so much about the ecosystem and so much about the hardware, there's a social element. There's a je ne sais quoi to the user experience as far as software and services that they're not quite. They can't spark the imagination in that way. Now, I had not heard, Chuck, that Beats is better at discoverability, but I do know that people do like that thing where it's like, I am at this place with these people doing this, feeling this way. I mean, somebody originally said it was basically like programming a radio station via Mad Lib, right? You say where you are, you say who you're with, you say what kind of mood you're in, and it starts playing music for you that it thinks matches. Is that better than Pandora's algorithm that they've been working on for close to a decade? I don't know if that's better, but it's certainly more human. I mean, it's more fun. It's honestly more Apple than iTunes Radio is. Whether it works or not, I couldn't say. And whether no, it's not worth $3.2 billion by itself. But I mean, all of it together is worth quite a bit, especially if you can make back that $3.2 billion in less than 3 years. And you're also still sitting there with $156 billion. I mean, no, you don't want to watch them flush money down the toilet. But I'm okay letting them gamble $3 billion when they've got $156 billion, and when it's on something that it seems like it will be interesting to watch. So,
that's an interesting description of Beats, and I'd not heard that. If that's the way Beats works, I don't know that it's necessarily better or worse than Pandora. It's just different. Yeah. Because Pandora is based on a whole different algorithm. I like this, so you're probably going to like that, even though it may be completely off the wall, as opposed to saying, okay, this kind of music fits this kind of mood.
Well, and the other thing is, I mean, Beats also lets you go in and just find specific songs. Pandora does not let you do that, and that to me that's why Pandora that's why Pandora never caught on with me personally, because it turns out if I want to listen to, I don't know, if I want to listen to Toby Keith, I want to listen to Toby Keith. I don't want to listen to somebody that Pandora thinks sounds like Toby Keith. Now, if I'm in that kind of mood, then yeah, Pandora is great, or iTunes Radio is fine for me, or maybe the thing on Beats where I say, yeah, I'm here and I feel like this and I feel like this, I mean, so, I mean, that's the other part of it. It's not just the Pandora or the iTunes Radio we'll play you some music. I mean, the other part of Beats is they'll play you the music that you want to hear as well, which is why I gave Rhapsody money before I gave Spotify money. That's why that's my model of it personally.
And again, I have not tried Beats, so I'm pleading a little bit of ignorance. But can I program 5-10 songs that I pick in Beats?
I believe you can. You see, now I actually have not tried it either. I know that I wanted to try it because I was under the impression that you could. It comes with a huge library of songs, and and somebody will, of course, millions of people will correct me if I'm wrong, or however many listeners you have, or viewers.
3.
But I am okay. 3 people will correct me if I'm wrong. I believe you can either go in and make your own playlist, which is why it's the only reason I was even remotely interested in it at first. Or you can have it build a radio station, but that's true of almost. I mean, Rhapsody will build a radio station based on an artist for you. iTunes Radio will build a radio station based on an artist for you. Spotify will do that as well. So I mean, it's not a big differentiator. The big differentiator is how they do that. Instead of just throwing in an artist and saying, play me more songs like this one, you instead say, here's the kind of mood I'm in, see what you can find for me.
Right. And that was a point I was going to make about Pandora, that I can go in and pick a song. Mm-hmm. And it probably will play that one song, but then it will start riffing on the idea of, okay, here's something that from the Music Genome project matches that.
Right.
So you start with one, or you start with a couple, and go from there. But I too, because I'm now a Spotify subscriber, and I find it a very interesting, different experience. And Mark, I'm somewhere between you and Ken. I own a lot of music because I've collected music for a long time. Now, though, I'm not as anxious to go out to spend that much money on music, but I still have the hunger for music and the music that I want to listen to. And for the price of a CD a month or less, I have access to a huge library. So it's a different model. I don't know that. I personally don't care whether I own the music or not. It's just I want to have access to it, whether it comes from my wallet that I bought it and the CD is stored in a closet somewhere, or it's just streaming across the internet. The only concern I have about streaming remains the bandwidth caps, and that's a whole other discussion we don't need to go into. Other than that,
you guys have tapped into something that sparked my imagination about why the habits have changed. And I was sitting here thinking about how older users who grew up with computers, I started with an Apple II, tend to think in terms of controlling the machine. I wrote a checkbook program in BASIC years ago, and I write Perl scripts. I've done programming for a living with Lockheed Martin. I'm accustomed to getting inside my machine and making things happen. And when it comes to music, if I own music, I can control it. I can manage it. When I like a song, I want to hear it over and over again, and I want to have it in certain playlists that I concoct and custom design it my way. It could be, and what do you guys think, that perhaps younger users, especially with iPads, aren't as accustomed to managing things at a deep level in their computer, and so they kind of go with the flow. All they want to do is subscribe and listen to music and let it flow. And maybe that's what's driving the movement towards streaming as opposed to ownership. I don't know.
John, I think you're oversimplifying a little bit. I don't think so much that the younger millennials or college students, don't want to. You just want to listen to whatever's coming at them. I don't believe that at all, but rather I think it's about convenience, and then different habits of how people were accustomed. It's not like the old days, where you have to. Does anyone remember Tower Records? And LPs, and then cassette tapes and CDs and everything else. We've just been through in 25 years a huge proliferation of different media types. Right now, for maybe the past 12, 15 years or so, it's been very, very convenient to deliver music through bits over the net, and and I think we're seeing that there's a generation of people who that's all they've known, really. Sort of this idea of, other physical discs and media, well, that's what old people listen to. That's not me. I just, I just listen to it on my iPad,
That's right.
my iPod. So I really think this is just, at the forefront of both technological and, social change. And really, to remain vital, Apple has to do it. And will this work out? We don't know. Will it even be a thing? We don't know. But this is clearly the sort of shift that we need to be making and thinking about. Do you all remember what was about 3 years ago? I think it was at HTE purchased about 50% plus or minus share. I think just a little under. They didn't have control of Beats, and then about 2 years later, just fell apart, and they got their money back. What was that?
They didn't get all their money back. They got about half their money back, I think. And that's the other thing about if Apple screws up Beats so bad, so far Dre and Ivy just will buy it back.
Sure,
they'll hold on to part of the money, and then which is a hysterical idea to me. But I don't think Apple would. If Apple did it, if it became a thing, I don't think they would screw it up. But yeah, I'm sorry, Mark. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Right. So I guess obviously something there went wrong. What was it? And is there some sort of instructive cautionary tale that is important for the people at Apple who will need to integrate it and make it work if that comes about?
I was not aware of that one. That's really interesting.
That's a very fun thing to think about. I would argue that the biggest difference between HTC buying it and Apple buying it is it's HTC.
Yes.
I mean, which may sound terrible, but I mean, seriously, HTC right now says that one of the biggest problems they've had over the past several years is they've not been able to craft their message well.
Right.
So spending however much money they spent on Beats, I mean, they thought they were buying cool. And a lot of people say that's all Apple is buying, is that they're buying cool. But the thing is, Apple's already cool, so they're just buying more cool. HTC is a Far East phone maker, and they tried to buy Cool, and for a while they owned part of Cool, but they, couldn't integrate that to save their lives.
Right, because I think that's the intangible. Just listening, to you talk, Ken, and sort of Chuck's reaction to it is the thing. The intangible about Beats is the perception that it's cool, that it's new, that it's exciting. Mm-hmm. That's what's different than iTunes Radio. You put iTunes in front of anything, I don't think it's going to make it exciting at all. Just because. Maybe because we just know iTunes too well, and we can't envision it suddenly becoming anything new and different and exciting. So I think that's why it makes some degree of sense to me that Apple develop a new brand, and they can run them both in parallel, and let's reconvene in 3 or 5 years and see if the rumor came true, and then see what happens. Because I think there's no guarantee it will work. Who knows? Companies are so fragile that there may be ways that Apple could screw it up.
Did this happen because iTunes became too big a monster, and it wasn't factored in, and it wasn't a great music player, and it wasn't easy to add music, and there was a lot of agenda. I had to have this version in order to upgrade your iPhone. And all the different things you do in iTunes, it's so complicated. If it were the world's greatest focused music player and iTunes Radio was beautifully integrated into it, would things have been different?
Personally, I think it's about cost. I mean, that may sound crazy, but personally, I think it's about cost. You asked a question a minute ago about, you want to control your music and other people are fine just letting whatever play. The key to Pandora is you can have it for free. If you're willing to listen to ads, and you can have Pandora for free. And that's a large part. I honestly think that's a large part of how Pandora did it. Then they also had the voodoo of, we're working on the Music Genome Project, and that may actually be a real thing, but it sounds really cool and it sounds really technical. And Pandora caught on at a time when streaming was still for the tech set. It wasn't for the general consumer in a lot of ways. I mean, this to me is what's fascinating about Spotify. The way Spotify got my money as opposed to Rhapsody, after years of giving Rhapsody my money, was because Spotify included Facebook. And I know that's supposed to be anathema, but I could then look over on the side and see what my friends are playing. And that's how I got my music discoverability. Because if I'm in the mood to hear what somebody else is listening to, then I can go ahead and choose who I'm listening to and the kinds of things, that I want to look for, as opposed to Pandora saying, no, just trust me. We have studied this and we know exactly what you're going to want to hear next. Because 5 times out of 10, they had no clue what I wanted to listen to next. And I would very quickly hit my 6 fast forward, and I'd have to wait for an hour and listen to them tell me listen to them play whatever they wanted to play, or switch to what was in my iTunes, which was more often what happened. I'm so glad you convened the MacJury to talk about Beats, Chuck.
Yes.
But Ken, wait a minute. Are you, because I guess there are others out there. I just haven't found any yet. Do you really care what your friends are listening to?
Occasionally. If I'm in the
Really?
mood for something else, well, I don't care what they're listening to. It's not like, oh, I'm going to quit being friends with him because of this. But no, there's one friend in particular on Facebook who I know knows a lot more about house and other kinds of music that I can't even tell you the names of, but I've heard her play some stuff before. I'll give her a shout out. Why not? Rachel Depp does a show called One Indie Nation. She's been doing this podcast for, I guess, 5 years now, maybe 6. And she has some really interesting music on her show. But I don't want to listen to her podcast over and over again because it's the same music over and over again. But she and I are friends on Facebook. So I can see what she's listened to lately, assuming that she's been active on Spotify lately, and go in and find new music that way. And it's the same thing with some other friends who it's like, I don't even know how to ask them about what they're listening to, but I do know they're listening to stuff. And so I can tap into, if they're sharing it publicly, I can tap into what they're listening to. And then I've now discovered music in a way that's more personal to me than just, hitting play and hoping something good turns up.
So she's a tastemaker as opposed to being a friend. That may not be much of a distinction.
It feels weird, but yeah, I mean, I would say probably. I mean, I don't know for sure. She was at Loeb a couple of years ago. I never got to go to Loeb, so maybe. I don't know. Do you know Loeb? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So again, I think Chuck, maybe that makes it a little bigger and just a little more traditional. I mean, I think that really one of the beauties of social is that people can connect in wide scale to lots of other people that they have different degrees of relationships with. Just learn, that person knows a little bit about music. Everything else, I don't know anything about her, but, I like her taste in music. I have some time tonight. Let me go see what she has that's new that might be appealing. And, I think, that's what Ping was supposed to be, but it failed miserably for all sorts of reasons. And, I think really, the approach of trying to have an algorithm that will match taste, that's a foolish technologist's approach. I think we're social people. We'd rather reach out and touch and get and learn from somebody rather than have an algorithm say, oh well, if you like this, you're going to like this other thing. Because then you're pretty soon regressing into the worst of the worst.
Apparently, I'm a robot. I'm not sure because I kind of like the algorithm thing, but that's all right. Whatever.
But let me ask: do you use it to discover new music, or are you comfortable getting in and listening to a channel, and you're comfortable to the stream of music that you hear for a half hour or an hour?
If you're talking about Pandora, yeah, I am. I will tune into a channel and let it throw things at me, and if I don't like it, I will skip it up to however many times per hour I can. And if I do like it, then I'll put a star beside it. And if I really like it, I may even make a note of it or consider
go buy it,
purchasing it at iTunes, or at the very least, adding it to a Spotify playlist. Mm-hmm. So but again, I'm not. It's a fine line between whether it's the algorithm or Ken telling me I should listen to this or John telling me I should listen to this. So it's just any way I guess you can find it at the end of the day. Guys, this has been really interesting, and I hate to move on, but I want to make sure we don't spend the whole time on beats because really that's not why we convened this jury. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, app.net, Google+, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date with all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com.